Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I am Karan Thapar and today I am going to talk to one of the most renowned journalists of our time, Karan Thapar sir. Thank you so much sir for agreeing to do this interview.
A pleasure.
Sir, my first question is, has media industry undergone a tremendous amount of corporatization in recent times? Do you think corporatization in media continues to pose a serious challenge? How do you think can this challenge be avoided?
I'm not sure why corporatization would pose a challenge because corporatization simply means owned by companies and run by companies as businesses run. And at the end of the day, the media, in addition to providing information and in addition to being educative, is in fact a business. It needs to run profitably, or at least it needs to run efficiently, if not always profitably, to ensure it survives. So, corporatization, which enforces procedures and standards that make you efficient and hopefully at some point profitable, has to be a good thing. I don't know why it would be a problem. So, can you explain why you asked the question?
So, because nowadays media has become a business, I personally think media should not be a business. It should be a social role. Journalists should be social servant, and they should be doing something for the good for the country. But it has become a business. Don't you think it's not good for the
I
country?
don't think the distinction between making profit and doing good for the country is a true distinction. You can do both together. Secondly, journalists have to be paid and the media needs to survive, and to survive it needs to be profitable. Otherwise, who will pay for it? Someone has to pay for it. And you do have government owned but autonomous media such as the BBC in England. But England, in that sense, is a unique country where the British government, regardless of whether it's Labour or the Conservatives, have actually created the structure and fight and struggle to ensure the independence of the BBC. And yet, from time to time, the BBC is criticised. But India has not got to a point where something like Prasar Bharati, which is created to be an imitation of the BBC, actually has got that autonomy. And therefore, if you are not to be private and profitable, someone has to pay for you, and the only other entity is the government. And if the government pays for you, you will then be government controlled because the BBC is not going to be emulated in India. You can set up trusts. Some papers like The Guardian in Britain operate under trust, but even those trusts have to show money, otherwise, the trust fails. So, at the end of the day, good journalism has to be journalism that survives on its own. And to survive on its own, you have to break even. You don't have to make obscene profits, and certainly profit making can't be the motive, but you need to be able to break even to assure autonomy. Otherwise, you become dependent to whoever pays the check.
Sir, IMD Ministry on November 2nd had ordered a ban on one of the Hindi channels. You know that incident, everybody knows. What's your take on that?
I think banning a channel would be wrong.
Sorry for the interruption, and then later he just put the ban on hold.
I think banning a channel is wrong because it's a way in which the government exercises punishment on the basis that the government is both the judge, jury, and executioner. And I think that sort of control in the hands of the government impairs the independence of the media. I think the media needs to self-regulate itself. You have a News Broadcasters Authority. The News Broadcasters Authority are the people who should have been alerted if someone felt a mistake had happened. Their investigation, their judgment, and their punishment, if punishment were to be meted out, should have been the right course of action.
So overall, how do you see Indian media? Has the contents become better, or do we need to work hard to make our contents better as compared to Western media or BBC or CNN?
I think our television, to take that as the first part of the answer, has people with great diligence and enthusiasm, increasing, but I don't think still sufficient experience. Where we fall short in television is that we end up giving the impression that we lack gravitas, we lack judgment. We compete in terms of wanting to be first rather than most accurate and most reliable. We get obsessed with issues that carry on for hours on end, be it cricket, be it political developments, be it honor killings or whatever. Things need to have a certain perspective, and the extent to which you cover them should be determined by that perspective and priority. Obsession with an issue for hours on end is, I think, very poor judgment and therefore poor journalism. And finally, I would say television doesn't have enough reflective documentary style program making or proper thoughtful discussion programs that actually expand your horizons and open your eyes to things you didn't know. What we have are quarreling matches where people scream and shout at each other. And that's partly because channels go in for TRP in the belief that these sort of shambolic matches on TV attract audiences, whereas in fact I think they put them off. Rather than to provide information, we concentrate on what I call the tamasha and the spectacle rather than the information. We generate heat rather than shed light, and that's where I think we fall short. When it comes to newspapers, I think our newspapers have hugely improved. I think we have very good quality reportage and also very effective, thoughtful, thought-provoking editorial pages and op-ed pages. And so I do believe that our newspapers are world-class.
So do you think print media is on decline due to the increase in digital or internet proliferation in India?
No, I don't think the print media is in decline. I think the print media, like the print media in other countries, does face problems to do with raising revenue, profitability, even possibly readership. But that said and done, I think at the moment there is no comparison between the print media or, for that matter, even television and social media. Social media does not reflect journalism, it reflects the opinion of individual people that they're expressing. Journalism is something more than just opinion making. There's a certain requirement to verify what you're saying, there's a certain requirement to assess the importance of what you're saying, and there's a certain requirement to try and put it in context. None of that happens in social media.
So what is the work of journalism? Should journalists be allowed to report on the facts and the incidents, or they should be working as catalysts to impact the society for the better?
But I think the two happen together. When you say should journalists be allowed to report on the facts, I'm a bit perplexed by your phraseology. I think reporting on facts is what journalists are supposed to do. They don't need permission to do it. That is their raison d'etre. Facts, however, are sometimes unconfirmed, and you need to make it clear that your use of language, that what you're reporting is not 100% confirmed. Sometimes you need to double or triple source before you go ahead with it. You need to balance, you need to be accurate, you need your language to be measured. Plus, you need some sense of putting in context. So the object of journalism is in the first instance to inform and to educate and to make you aware. But in the second instance, it is also to raise important issues that arise out of what you're reporting. But you can raise issues without necessarily taking sides. The side taking is what happens on opinion pages. That's what happens in editorials. In the news pages, you can raise the issues that these facts give birth to without taking sides. And you can certainly also point out the consequences that flow, again, without taking sides. And that is an analytical procedure that can be done in a very balanced and objective way.
So do you think that news to be covered in the news channels are more and more decided by the Twitter trends in the recent times?
Unfortunately, yes. And that's mistakenly because channels in particular, newspapers less so, believe that somehow Twitter sets the agenda and therefore there's an audience out there, and if the social media is taking a particular line, we should either pursue it or totally counter it. I think social media and Twitter is one element. In India, I would say a fairly small element of what people think, because it's limited to those with smartphones, and it's limited to those who bothered to make their opinion known. It's not reflective of the 70% of India that doesn't have smartphones. It's not reflective of the majority of the country that hasn't bothered itself to put out their messages on Twitter. So it's one element of consideration, but it shouldn't by any means be the biggest and certainly not the guiding and determining one.
So how do you see the future of television or broadcasting media in this country?
I think it's a healthy future in that there is an expanding number of people who don't have easy access to television or cable and therefore will in due course get it. Therefore, the market will increase. And therefore, in terms of the expansion of the market, it has to be a healthy future because there's a huge potential out there that you can tap. But in terms of the quality of the product, I would like to see considerable improvement. And I've touched on that in my earlier answers, so I won't repeat myself. But I think television in particular needs to look at itself more critically, ask where it's letting itself down. I use that rather than failing, and correct and improve. And I would say that there is a lot to be learnt if you look objectively and try and understand what is it that the BBC, but also CNN and Al Jazeera, but I would say BBC in particular do that makes the BBC such a credible channel that the world all over respects and from whom the news is usually always reliable. And that is perhaps more true of BBC than CNN and Al Jazeera. What is it that makes the BBC that enviable channel And that is what we need to emulate and move towards.
So, do you think any BBC or CNN coming up in India in near future?
No, I don't.
So now let me ask a question on India-Pakistan relationship. What's your take on India-Pakistan relationship? Has it improved in a positive way or in a positive direction
Has it improved since when?
since the Modi government came?
I think India-Pakistan relations have rather madly yo-yoed since the Modi government came. And I'm not going to go through the chronology of what's happened, but starting with the swearing in when the Pakistan Prime Minister and the rest of SAARC were invited, which was a high, to the collapse of talks when the Foreign Secretary talks were suddenly called off, right? To the terror attacks, to the high point again when the Prime Minister suddenly appeared 2 Christmases ago in Lahore for Nawaz Sharif's birthday to greet him, right? To the collapse that happened thereafter with Pathankot and Uri. There's been a tremendous yo-yoing, and that's partly because I think the Indian government's Pakistan policy has been attempting to do two contradictory things, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes one in place of another. And there isn't, unfortunately, as I see it, a agreed view or consensus of plan about how to tackle Pakistan. They've attempted different things, sometimes doing polar opposites of each other, and that is unsettling. It certainly doesn't reflect anything more than an attempt to experiment, which is not necessarily always a plus point.
So what is your message for aspiring journalists like us?
I would say it's a great profession, but like all great professions, it's diligence and dedication that produce the best results. So you need to make sure of three things when you are a reporter. The facts are correct. Number two, the reportage that follows is balanced, which means that you've attempted to reflect accurately what the other side says, because there are often two sides to a case. Thirdly, your language is simple and effective, shorn of any reflection of your personal viewpoint. Language can very easily, sometimes without you even realizing, reveal your personal standpoint, and you need to read and read again to ensure that those little hints that you're giving away are removed, because the object of a reportage is to make people aware of the facts, the context, and the issues those facts raise, not your stand on them. That comes in a different section of the paper. But when you've done all of that, journalism is a very, very rewarding profession. It's a profession that gives you access to enormous experience of great difference and variety. It gives you access to interesting people. It takes you into different countries to get to know them. It gives you a chance to get to know your own people. It's an eye-opening experience, truly. It's a world-revealing experience, and it takes you often out of yourself, which is an enriching thing. But be careful that you don't jump the gun with half-baked facts, which you haven't double-checked, without balance, and loose use of language, which allows the leakage of your personal position into reportage where it shouldn't be.
Thank you so much for this interview, sir. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We'll be back with other episode next time. Thank you so much for watching.